Hello and welcome to the HP Engineering video podcast series. My name is Brandon Pinkerton. I'm the owner of HP Engineering. Today we are here in Dallas. I have two guests with me today. Emily Waldenmeyer is the Regional Director of our Dallas operations and Vice President in HP Engineering. We also have a special guest today, Erin Peavy with HKS. She is an architect and researcher. And today we're going to be talking about some different topics related to the AEC industry, but particularly in the built environment. We're going to hit on wellness. We're going to talk about what that means, what that looks like in our current environment, coming out of a pandemic even. And we'll kind of see where it goes from there. What I'd like to do, though, is kind of start with some introductions on the couch here with us today.
Let's start with you, Erin. You're the guest. You'll go first.
All right. I am Erin Peavy. So my background is in both psychology as well as architecture. I'm a licensed architect, but I partner widely with different institutions and organizations around how we design to foster health and well-being. And that is really whole person health. And one of the things I specifically specialize in that became very timely during the pandemic was the topic of how to design for connection and to combat loneliness. So yeah, that's who I am.
And as Brandon said, Emily Waldenmeyer here, Vice President and Director of the Dallas office. Erin and I have not only worked together, but we're great friends, and she's a connector in many ways, not just through the design world. So excited for this conversation. And first question I want to ask, and Brandon started off with, was we all hear this word built environment. Mm-hmm. Can you define that to someone that maybe doesn't know the AEC industry?
Yeah, totally. I think, a lot of times when we use the word environment, people use that to mean all sorts of milieus or different types of, what's your educational environment or what's your this or that. And a built environment is literally just like the space that we're in right now. It's any sort of space or place that is built. So think, if you are in the metaverse, it's a very weird sort of virtual built environment. Or we can talk about sort of the physical environment, which is all different components from built to natural worlds. So anytime you think of a park or your home or your office, all of those are built environments. I know that you all do some health environments, right? Mm-hmm. What do you find, I think the engineer's part in creating healthy spaces is incredibly important. And I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about why you feel that way.
Currently, we are doing some healthcare design with HKS on some projects in Oklahoma. And we've been doing healthcare projects, particularly in the tribal world for well over a decade now. And much of that healthcare and even our current projects are in rural locations. Yeah. And I think there's a big difference between what a rural built environment looks like versus one that might be in a more urban area. But from an engineering standpoint, people forget a lot of times that there are so many things you forget about when you're in a space that if they're wrong or if they're not good, then it's the worst problem in the world. When there's no issues with it, you never think about it. If a building is always comfortable, it's always 72 degrees or 70 degrees or whatever it's supposed to be, you'll never care if it's hot or too cold. If it's too hot, it's the only thing you think about. Yeah. If a room is not bright enough or it's too bright or whatever, it's the only thing you think about. So systems in a building have such a huge impact on whether the building can perform as it was designed. Yeah. And the architects rely on us. They do a great job with their design, with their interiors, with their selections, all of these kind of things. But the engineer does have the responsibility to showcase that and make sure that is what is seen and not other things that just make you ignore all the other work that's been put into the building.
When I think of all different types of spaces for health and well-being and exactly what you just talked about, I think of how we have these different set points and how choice and control are such big players in satisfaction. And I would love for you to talk about what your experience has been with that.
I'm glad you brought it up because in a rural environment, it's different.
Yeah, talk about it.
Okay, well, rural environment typically means we might be 50 miles away from equipment, parts, systems. It also means you are from a just reality of the situation, from a talent pool and a capability standpoint, you don't always have the resources to maintain an HVAC system that is infinitely variable. That can, the more variability and flexibility you have in an HVAC system, the more complicated it is, the more difficult it is to maintain. And so there is a challenge, and we've actually had to learn this, because an engineer always wants to, give their customer a Ferrari. And that's cool because it looks cool and it does all of these things, but they're really only capable of, a nice trusty pickup truck. And if you give them a Ferrari, they're going to run it in the ditch really quickly. And they don't care that they have a Ferrari anymore. They know that they can't get where they need to go. And so it's a very important thing to keep in mind that there are these things that you can do, and there are these things that the customer may even want. But then there's also a balance of making sure that you're not giving them something that's ultimately not going to be what's best for them. So I think that's an important piece that we come into with rural. So instead of, one of the first things we do now when we get into a rural design application is we ask who's going to be owning this building, who's going to be running it, and what are they comfortable with. And that helps drive a lot of the decision making. And then after we understand that, then we can start meeting, with the different user groups and things like that within the building, find out what's important to them and design something around their comfort and their needs that is not going to forsake, the fundamental, which is this is what it's going to be based off of, and we understand what we can do.
Yeah. One of the things that you're talking about, that controllability, we all as humans want it. Yeah. But sometimes there's that fine line also, not only is it available, but also cost-wise.
Oh, totally.
We would love, for every single one of us to have a little air conditioning system above us when it's 100 and some degrees outside, and our little thermostat of saying if we're hot or cold, but it's just not possible. And so it's that fine line of giving people the comfort and the controllability they want and need versus what can a facility afford.
But I think that there's creative options where we think, okay, well, we need, for instance, we've designed out natural ventilation of most of our buildings. But you think okay, that makes sense from a lot of sides, but a lot of other sides, you think of a particular part of year, you're able to have, that natural ventilation, or when COVID hit, or when, lots of different things are coming up now. And it's how does that allow for flexibility in the space, or what does that mean going forward?
I think the zeitgeist of the design want right now from healthcare facilities in particular is to build a lot of flexibility into the space. We have projects right now where they are, they're telling us, hey, we want 10 exam rooms, and we would like to be able to turn them into 10 isolation rooms.
Totally.
At some point. And
that's
not something we were doing. That's not something we were doing, 3 years ago. It was, these are your only 2 isolation rooms. And if, and so there are some challenges in designing that flexibility. Everybody wants it. And we are dealing with the balance of how to best implement that.
Totally. We did a lot of deep dives over during the pandemic. Myself, Jason Schroer, our director of health, and individuals from across, sectors, really looking at that flexibility aspect and how do you respond to a pandemic, and what is it that makes other spaces beneficial for some of that or less beneficial.
And a great transition here is we talking flexibility. Yeah. And so we're talking about flexibility in the design world. But another aspect of wellness that I kind of wanted to talk about was just the wellness of people in general.
Yes.
So we're talking about,
Amen.
We've talked about this a lot. And so the wellness of how do we keep, Brandon, you're the owner of HP. How do you keep wellness at the top of mind when productivity and profitability and some of these other things are out there? And I think flexibility is one of the things that HP does phenomenally. And hearing you guys discuss the flexibility of a hospital and turning this into this, and we've got to maybe do this. It sounds very similar to people. Everyone's so different, and everyone needs something. So, Aaron, how does HKS help and kind of frame wellness for all of their employees?
Yeah, I think HKS understands, like a lot of employers do, that well-being and health are one of the top considerations that people have with their employer. And that part of that is also, understanding and having that flexibility and support of your schedule. I think, we went to a very full flex model throughout the pandemic, and now we've started to come more into the office. But I also think it's about, making sure that people feel invested in and that they are supported regardless of what their work looks like or who they are. And I think, one of the silver linings, if you can call it that, of the pandemic was that people that, it was in some ways a great equalizer, that people that maybe, have a disability or have some sort of thing that is keeping them back from being comfortable in the office were able to shine and were able to be comfortable and working. And I think that's really phenomenal. But I also think, now as we are back in the office, there's this connection that we get to have with each other. And then we need to figure out, like, what does that balance look like?
Yeah, that balance is a really hard thing. I know coming from 100% remote to flexibility to, what is this flexibility to, having some connection.
Yeah.
Because you've done a lot of research on the connective kind of world in general, and people need to connect. And that's one of the things that we're really seeing is it's important for people to have those relationships in the office. It helps people want to come to the office. And that's one of my big things here in Dallas is I want the office to be somewhere that you come and you enjoy. It's not, I have to go to the office today. It's, fun. Look, I'm going to see all of my friends in the office, and Brandon knows this. We're going to throw rubber chickens around and Nerf guns or something. And all of a sudden I'm going to be scared because someone jumped out of the corner. But it's those fun things that I'm so happy we're getting back to.
Yeah.
But Brandon, you want to talk a little bit of some of the things, the implementations that HP is trying to do to kind of stay in front of wellness and keep out of burnout and all the good things that are happening in today's industry?
Yeah. And first, let me say that the remote versus in the office thing is I believe it's a discussion still to be had and to be learned. I think I've seen even some executives from major corporations that work from the office is the only work to be done. I mean, that's a really bold statement. I mean, that's their prerogative. And I think part of what I've observed is that there are some generational thinkings. People from a certain generation are going to think a certain way about it and have some strong beliefs about it. And we've also found it at HP Engineering is that in spite of what we may want, in spite of any type of flexibility that we may want to bring into this situation, it falls very heavily on the management of that for it to be effective. We can tell everybody that they can work from home, but if they don't have someone that can effectively help them do their job and empower them to do their job, it's not good. And so it is not just about saying, or implementing a policy. You really do have to manage it well.
I also think that their managers have to show by and lead by example. Because if I'm going to be in the office every day from 6 a.m. to 6 o'clock at night, and then just be like, well, okay, you guys can work from home. I know that my staff that's working under me is like, well, does she really believe that? And then the morning that maybe I'm like, hey guys, I'm going to work from home. I'll see you at noon. It's like, okay, all of a sudden she does live through her word.
You're very right. It's in the example you set and what you allow. But the part that I feel the most passionate about is that we're going to have people working remotely. Or we're going to have people in these flexible environments that they are not pariahs, that they're not something seen as something less than because of the situation that currently we have employees in New York, remote parts of Texas, Montana. I don't even know where all of them are, honestly. I should know that, but I don't. North Dakota, and we're making it work, and I'm really proud of that. But I think to answer your question earlier, you had asked kind of about some of the things that we're doing. You do kind of want to know if what you're doing is working, and you want to know if there are things that could be better, could be improved from all levels of this. What is it that it's going to take to make this work? We implemented a kind of what I'll call a micro survey program within the organization. We're using something called Tiny Pulse, and there was a little bit of implementation and cost in setting that up. But effectively, everyone in our organization gets kind of a one-question survey, and it's all related to your experience within the company. And what is it that from a 0 to 5? So we're constantly being able to look at important parts of our organization and important parts of what it means to work for HP Engineering on a 0 to 5 scale. It's like we're a 3 and we need to be a 4 or what. And further with something like Tiny Pulse, we're also able to look at similar organizations and see how we're doing based on not only what we do, but the size of our company and those kind of things as well. So all of those things drive a lot of data up to the senior leadership team where we're going to get make decisions about what those do, and it's been pretty well received, I think.
It's been awesome. I know at first I was like, another survey.
I know, right?
But it comes through. We use Teams, and so it comes through, and it's like you got a survey. It's one question, and it's
not 20.
Yeah, it's not 20. You don't have to stop your day.
So how often?
Once a week.
Yeah, once a week. And so this week's was something about the stress level of your job, and some of it they are anonymous, and so. We know that it could be an absolutely stressful day. So if I rated it a 5 or a 10 of 1 to 0 to 5, then there's some other reasons, and you can have a little comment section. But you want to reply because it's to make the company better.
Yeah.
The other thing is, I think what we're hoping is, due to the workload that we've seen over the last 2 years, we're trying to combat burnout, and so getting the employee engagement, trying to make sure that we catch it before it's happening is so hard.
And we get to deep dive a little bit because the great thing about this software program, and I'm not trying to sell this thing, but the great part about it is that we can kind of, if we see something, someone comes in and says, I'm giving this a 1 out of 5, our HR team can actually engage in a conversation with that person anonymously. That's can maintain that anonymity and say, hey, what did you mean when you did this, or whatever. And we've gotten a lot of detailed fidelity to what those responses are.
I think we're having fun with it too. We're making sure it's relaxed, and we'll see. I'm excited to see in the next year.
Yeah, I just think it's so important that everyone knows that you care, and it's more than just saying it. Right? Well, it's been a very great conversation, and from a timing standpoint, all things do kind of have to come to an end. So,
unfortunately, I could talk to you guys for hours.
Yeah. So, I just want to say thanks to you, and thanks for spending time with us. It's been fun to talk. I mean, we've talked about wellness, but we've talked about wellness from the built environment. What does it mean from a design standpoint? We talked a little bit, and a lot of the conversation moved towards where I think our passion is to wellness within the individual and within the workplace. Thanks again. Thanks you.
For having me.
Yeah. Thanks for listening in to the to this discussion, and we would love to continue that with you. Reach out to us, and we'll talk. So thank you, and we'll talk to you again.
Until next time.
Yep.
Bye, guys.
Bye.